Hello everyone, I am Tahira from IT department, AKGEC Engineering College. Today I'll be giving a brief lecture on the topic of entrepreneurship concepts, which comes under the subject of project management and entrepreneurship under AKGEC, which has got subject code of KHU 202. The topics which I will cover today are what is entrepreneurship, what are the concepts, what are the terms which you will come across when you're talking about entrepreneurship, what is its need, what are the scope of it. We'll be talking about the competencies, the traits involving entrepreneurial concepts. We'll be talking about factors affecting entrepreneurial developments. I'll also talk about the 3 E's. We'll talk about the difference between entrepreneurs and managers, and I'll also talk briefly about some types of entrepreneurs that we come across in our today's life. To start with, let us first define what exactly who exactly an entrepreneur is. The word entrepreneur, basically it has originated from the French word entreprendre, which means to undertake or to go between. Basically, an entrepreneur is he or she, is basically an individual who undertakes risk. Actually, he is an undertaker of risk. He is an undertaker of risk. And why does it go for, how does it undertake risk? Because he undertakes risk through new ventures. He comes up with new ventures, and because the prospects of the new ventures are not very certain whether it will lead to profit or loss, and hence we can say an entrepreneur is an individual who undertakes risk for a new venture, a new enterprise, and based on whether the enterprise or the venture leads to profit or loss, the entrepreneur will further subsequently decide his or her course of action. If you look at the Webster's dictionary definition, it is written there that entrepreneur is a person who organizes, manages, or assumes the risk of a business or an enterprise. So we can say when you are talking about an entrepreneur, the most important word associated with an entrepreneur is risk. He or she is an entrepreneur if he or she has the guts or has the willpower to undertake risk when he or she is starting a new venture. As per Oxford Dictionary, an entrepreneur is a person who undertakes an enterprise with a high chance of profit as well as a high chance of loss. And because this thing is not fixed, and hence we say it involves risk, because it is not it cannot be forecasted beforehand whether the venture or the enterprise on which the entrepreneur is dealing with will lead to profit or loss. So we can say an entrepreneur is a person who undertakes a business activity specifically for those activity where he has no background knowledge. An entrepreneur is a person who undertakes an activity for a certain domain on which comparatively his background knowledge is almost minimal and the risks involved are very high. So when these two are in combination, he has no background knowledge and the risks involved are high, then we'll say he or she is an entrepreneur in the true sense of the term. So we can say if either of the two elements, that is, he has no background or he has no considerable risk, if any of this, he does not take considerable risk, if either of these two elements are missing, in that case we'll say that he or she is not an entrepreneur and his venture is not an entrepreneurial venture. So as per the Oxford Dictionary, an enterprise is basically an undertaking which has bold characteristics, so that it is a bold undertaking as per the definition of Oxford Dictionary. We have another definition of entrepreneur as per Encyclopedia Britannica. In that case, we are saying an entrepreneur is an individual who bears the risk of operating a business. That means he or she will take the sole responsibility of the outcome of the operational of the outcome of the business, whether the outcome leads to profit or loss. He or she bears the risk of it. And the most important aspect about is that it is concerned with the uncertainty involving future conditions. We have another term called entrepreneurship. We have, who is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a person. An entrepreneur is a person. We can say an entrepreneur is a person or an Individual is a person or an individual who basically undertakes risk, and he or she ventures into new, he or she comes up with new ventures, with no background knowledge. This is a very important trace of an entrepreneur. Now, if you're coming to entrepreneurship, an entrepreneurship is the process through which an entrepreneur seeks the innovation and employment. So the process on which an entrepreneur embarks into to come up with a new venture, the very process, we call it as an entrepreneurship. So we have these terms called entrepreneurship and enterprise. So basically an entrepreneur is so basically we can say an entrepreneur is a person, so we can say an entrepreneur is a person who undertakes the risk, and entreprise is the entrepreneurship is the process by which the entrepreneur undertakes the entrepreneurship, and the enterprise is the final outcome or the object. So we have these three E's. I'll be talking more about it in the next slides. So we have the very term entrepreneur, which was first coined by Richard Cantillon in 1755 in his essay The Nature of Commerce. Here, according to Richard Cantillon, he has said that an entrepreneur is someone, he or she is an entrepreneur is a person who buys factors of productions, like he or she buys some factors of productions, like he can go for ownership of, or rather buying of land or labor or capital. He or she is an entrepreneur if he buys these factors of productions at a certain buying price, and using these factors he or she combines them and comes up with a new product or a service. Using this product or a service, this is then sold at an uncertain price which is not known in advance, and thereby, because the price is not known in advance, it is uncertain when he or she starts it, we say there is the chances, or there is the factor involving bearing the risk of the outcome. So as per Richard Cantillon, an entrepreneur is someone who buys factors of production at a certain price to combine them into a product or a service, which is then sold at uncertain prices, thereby bearing the risk of the outcome. So we can say, as a person who pays a certain price to a production, that means that who is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a person. An entrepreneur is a person who, what does it do? He buys, what does he buy? A product. He buys some factors of production, that is land, labor or capital, and he basically resells, he uses those factors, makes a product and resells at a certain uncertain price, which involves risk, and thereby on the process there is the prospect of coming up with profit or loss. So we can say an entrepreneur has this particular trait as per Mr. Richard Cantillon. So if you're taking up some examples, of entrepreneur, we have Jamshedji Tata, we have G.D. Birla, we have Jamnalal Bajaj, we have Dhirubhai Ambani. These are examples who are entrepreneurs who have taken up risk, and their risk, whatever risk they have taken up, they have ventured into, ultimately it had yielded profit. And these are examples of entrepreneurs who have got success stories that all of us talk about. All of these entrepreneurs, they have taken risk, they have identified opportunities, they have explored the potential, what is involved in exploring this in the opportunities, and they have exploited whatever chances they have come, and ultimately they have actually they have yielded good results, they have got profit. They were, we can say, they were economic agents, and they have set up their own business which has come up with big profit. So we can say an entrepreneur basically is a person who takes risk, starts a new venture with uncertainties, with the sole aim of gaining profit. But on the process, he or she is mentally prepared for bearing profit as well as risk from the venture on which he or she is starting with. So if we are looking at the chances that involves an entrepreneur, we can say an entrepreneur, from an entrepreneur's point of view, he or she gets an opportunity to create his own destiny. Why so? Because he or she thinks of an opportunity, explores some potential, explores some new opening, and starts his venture. So he or she, we can say, is a creator. The entrepreneur creates his or her own destiny. The entrepreneur gets an opportunity to make a difference because he or she is an entrepreneur. He or she is an entrepreneur in the sense that he or she can explore, can identify a certain area where there is a chance for a new, there is a chance for some potential, there is a chance for some opening which might lead to profits, so that thereby making difference. And at the same time, you can see it also gives an opportunity to explore one's full potential, to come up with good profits, an opportunity on the process, an opportunity to contribute or to help society, and the most important point is to do what one enjoy. So through entrepreneurship, or an entrepreneur gets a chance to explore all these opportunities. If you're talking about the pros and cons that are involved in for an entrepreneur, we can say an entrepreneur, he or she is his own boss. He or she, whoever is the entrepreneur, he or she doesn't work under any person to whom he has to report to. So he or she, an entrepreneur, is his own boss. All the profit, not only the profit, as well as the loss, are borne by the entrepreneur. There'll be greater variety in roles and tasks, and on the process, when the entrepreneur is venturing to something which he believes that it will lead to profit, it will make a difference in the society. So on the process, an entrepreneur ultimately can gain self-confidence. The work involved in entrepreneurship can be very satisfying, and on the process, if the venture becomes a success, then it leads to immense profit, it leads to immense profit, it leads to immense satisfaction as well. The cons or the downside for an entrepreneur, if we look into, if you just want to summarize the downside, we can say an entrepreneur, basically he or she is someone he or she is an entrepreneur who pursues his dream. Basically, he takes a risk, starts a new venture, something which is not a very much a venture in the sense, a new venture in the sense it is a new innovation. The new venture is normally a new innovation, which normally is not a common practice, something very new, which others are not into it. So he or she follows his or her own dream and proceeds with that. So on the process, the entrepreneur mostly ends up being alone. The decisions the entrepreneur takes are his own responsibilities. The profits are his, as well as the losses are also his. If the entrepreneurship yields profit, that's good. But if it yields losses, then also this is the cons. It might so happen that he or she is investing huge sum of money, but ultimately it did not yield the required or the expected profit, and the loss is something which he or she has to bear. So this is a big cons of an entrepreneur. The work that the entrepreneur might be doing may not be fully satisfying, because what he or she has expected or dreamt of as before he started the entrepreneurship, it might not be actually that way when the process actually starts. It might involve long number of working hours, and the success may not be immediately visible. Normally, when you are going for a new venture, it takes years, maybe 4 to 5 years, to actually see the results coming up. So one needs to be very patient to wait for the results to come. There are instances, there are cases where people tend to give up. So the lack of success is another important cons which affects lots of entrepreneurs, and many entrepreneurs on the process give up midway. And of course, because the entrepreneur is pursuing a particular project which is totally his own dream child, which is totally new, a new innovative idea, a concept, and so it is something which he or she has to work really hard on, and this involves giving long working hours, and on the process his or her social and family life also might get affected. So what are the roles that an entrepreneur plays? next topic that we'll be talking about is what roles does the entrepreneur play. Then we'll just categorize the roles. First role is the social roles. Then we'll be talking about the economic roles. We'll be talking about the technological roles. We'll be talking about some other entrepreneurial functions. So first, let us talk about the social roles. The social roles of an entrepreneur. That means what roles does an entrepreneur play when it comes to society. That the roles can be creating opportunities for entrepreneurship. First role, creating jobs or employment opportunities in the society. Because why? How so? Because the entrepreneur, when he is venturing into an entrepreneurship, it's not a one-man army. He or she has to involve lots of manpower to get the work going. So when he or she is involving manpower, so he or she has to go for including people, recruiting people who will do his work. So this leads to the creation of jobs and employment opportunities. Then it also leads to engaging in social welfare services and also transforming a standard working procedure into a more modern approach. An entrepreneur can work on these factors, he or she, whenever he works on, most of the entrepreneurs works on some of these factors, and this thereby he or she makes a difference in society. So this is some of the social roles of an entrepreneur. The economic roles of an entrepreneur, that means when the first one is bearing the risk of failing in the business. That's, as I've already discussed this point previously. Next is mobilizing the revenue of the organization properly, ensuring that the money that is generated from the entrepreneurship is being used properly. Utilizing whoever the manpower or the human resource, whoever is there working for the entrepreneurship, for that particular entrepreneur, he has to ensure that the human resource is used efficiently in a more cost efficient manner, and also to provide channels for further economic growth in the organization. So these are some of the areas where an entrepreneur plays a big economic role. Next role is technological roles of an entrepreneur. That's when you're talking about the technological roles played by an entrepreneur, some of the instances we can say, that is, one instance is changing the traditional technology to modern system, or adapting an improved technology to business enterprise, or utilization of available technology in the production process, or developing efficiency and competence in the workforce through technology. One big example we can talk about technological roles, if you're taking the examples of Zepto in today's market, or let us say taking the examples of Blinkit in today's market. These are examples where the entrepreneur has ventured into doing some changes in the traditional technological background and coming up with some modern systems or modern software enhancements via which the customer can get his products within a few couple of maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So these are examples where the entrepreneur plays a big technological role as an entrepreneur. Now, we will now talk about the functions related to an entrepreneur. First is idea generation, the most important function which an entrepreneur is concerned with, because an entrepreneur can only come up with an entrepreneurship only when he has a good idea, a different idea, an innovative idea. And so this is a very important function of an entrepreneur, that is where the entrepreneur, it depends what idea, what product to develop, which enterprise to open, and where to actually open the business. That means the idea generation is an important part when it comes to entrepreneur, because what should be the entrepreneurship process, what product is to be delivered, and what are the prospects for the success of this product. So all of this needs to be carefully thought about, and this is only possible when the idea behind it is a good idea. So idea generation is an important function for an entrepreneurial quality. Determination of objectives, what is the objective of that particular enterprise. How to raise the funds, whether the money can be self-financed, or whether we'll go for loans. How to procure the raw materials for the business on which the entrepreneur is venturing into. How to procure the machinery for, again, the particular business for which the entrepreneur is venturing into. Market research to see whether there are any competitors, or any other people who are also working in that area, how much work has already been done in that particular area, whether the entrepreneur on the dream project on which the entrepreneur is venturing into, whether it is something new that is only can be certified or can be properly concluded upon only after some market research, where you will see how your competitors are actually doing in that domain. Determination of the form of enterprise. Recruitment of manpower, as I told you, it is never a one-man army. Any entrepreneurship involves lots of manpower, where huge number of people should be there to work for the project involved in that entrepreneurship. So recruitment of manpower is also very important. Recruitment of manpower, deciding on their salary, implementation of the project, which relates with of all of these things, getting the raw materials, getting the machinery, getting the manpower, all of this comes into the play when you're talking about implementation of the project. Now, if you're talking about the functions, then we can say that the primary functions related to an entrepreneur are planning of the entrepreneurial process, the organization, the decision making, management, innovation, because that innovation is related to the idea generation, for which the very process of entrepreneurship has started. Risk bearing, because as I said to you, as I told previously, that whether there will be profit or loss is something very uncertain once the entrepreneurship starts. So risk bearing is also a very important function, and that of course relates to uncertainty bearing. Other functions related to an entrepreneur are diversification of production. For example, if you are talking about Reliance, for example, Reliance, they have diversified in different domains. They have diversified in electronics, they have diversified into garments, they have diversified into petroleum sectors, and so many. So when you're talking about diversification of production, so that means when an entrepreneur is working on a certain entrepreneurship, and after, for example, that enterprise has become a hit, in that case, one needs to have the ability to come up with a new idea of diversifying into a different domain. The best example for that is Reliance. Next is expansion of the enterprise, that means trying to, as with time, trying to expand the domain. Maintaining the cardinal employer-employee relation, this is very important. Tackling of labor problems, looking into the fact that the laborers, the manpower, the human resource involved in that entrepreneurship they are being satisfied. So looking into these problems. Coordination with the outside agencies, suppliers and wholesaler, retailers, etc. These are some other functions which we can say about. So when you're talking about the skills involved for an entrepreneur, the skills are administrative skills, where he or she needs to have administrative qualities of how to handle the various roles as an administrator. Leadership skills, so that the entrepreneur needs to be a leader, has to have the quality of believing his dreams and making others also follow his dreams and work for him. In case of conflicts arising among his colleagues, among his team member, he or she has to have the quality of managing the conflict, that is conflict management skills. An entrepreneur also need to have managerial skills like planning, organizing of the entrepreneurship, looking into the staffing part, the directing part, and the controlling part. So these are some of the other skills that an entrepreneur needs to have. Now, when you're talking about the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager, so we have this term, we all have heard this term manager, and we also know by now we are already talking about an entrepreneur. So if you're talking about the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager, so both of them sound somewhat similar. In fact, we can say that they have a lot of commonalities between the entrepreneur and a manager, but they have some distinct differences. And the differences we can say, when you're talking about differences from primary motives point of view, here entrepreneurs, they are totally independent, they have their own they create their own opportunities. When it comes to managers, they are working for promotions, for rewards. And when it comes to time orientation, managers are working for short-term limits to meet weekly, monthly or quarterly targets. And when it comes to entrepreneur, the targets are normally involving years, like 5 to 10 years. When you're talking about functional styles, managers, they normally delegate their work to somebody else, or they supervise it they don't, or supervise, like it's more than direct involvement. But when it comes to entrepreneur, they have direct involvement. The risk involving managers are low, where it is comparatively higher in case of entrepreneur. The attitude involving managers are conservative, whereas for an entrepreneur it is not so. The decision making style, when it comes to managers, they take safer decisions, whereas when it comes to entrepreneurs, the decisions are involved with lots of risk. Some examples of successful entrepreneurs are Mukesh Ambani, Ratan Tata ji, Narayan Murthy. These are examples of entrepreneurs who have made it big. Ajim Premji, Anand Mahendra. When you're talking about managers, we have Sundar Pichai from Google, we have Satya Nadella from Microsoft, Indra Nyogi from Pepsi, and so on. These are examples of successful managers. So there is a distinct line of difference between entrepreneurs and managers, and I have just talked about these points. Now, I have already talked briefly about, I have already touched about enterprise, talked a little bit about enterprise and entrepreneurship, just a little bit more. As I told you, an entrepreneur is a person, whereas the entrepreneur is the, we can say an entrepreneur is the actor and entrepreneurship is the act. So the outcome of the actor and the act is called the enterprise. So enterprise is the, it is like the actor is the entrepreneur, the act is the entrepreneurship, and the enterprise is the outcome, and the enterprise is the outcome. So we can say entrepreneur is a person, entrepreneurship is the activity, or it is the process of identifying an opportunity. And we can say, and if you are trying to define entrepreneurship, we can say it is a process or a course of action that is undertaken by an entrepreneur to successfully run an enterprise. So when you're talking about entrepreneurship, we have this 3 E's that is coming in case of entrepreneurship development: entrepreneur, entrepreneurship, and enterprise. Entrepreneur, who is an individual or a person; entrepreneurship is the action or the process, and enterprise is basically the object. So these are the 3 E's this is the meaning of the 3 E's when you're talking about entrepreneurship development. So if you're just comparing entrepreneur with entrepreneurship, so entrepreneur is a person, entrepreneurship is the process. If you're looking at entrepreneur as an organizer, then entrepreneurship is the organization. If you say entrepreneur is an innovator, or in that case we'll say the entrepreneurship is the innovation, and so on. If we say the entrepreneur is a risk bearer, then we'll say the entrepreneurship is the risk bearing. So an entrepreneur is the person and entrepreneurship is the, now let us just talk about the types of entrepreneurs. When you're talking about categorization of entrepreneurs, there are different ways of categorizing the entrepreneur. I'll just talk about some categorization. One example, some names, let us say we're talking about ultrapreneur, co-preneur. These are some types of entrepreneurs. Ultrapreneur, basically they're an entrepreneur who does many things. Like it is someone who has many profit generating pursuits. An example of entrepreneur is, again, I'll say Reliance. We can say Tata's. These are examples of ultrapreneur, where the entrepreneur is venturing into more than one domains. Co-preneurs they are couples, they are entrepreneurial couples. An example of that are the founders of Nykaa. That means couples, when they are venturing into entrepreneurship, we can say they are called as co-preneurs. Intrapreneurs are corporate entrepreneurs. That means they are managers working within an organization, and at the same time they have entrepreneurial qualities, and the organization encourages them to pursue entrepreneurship. One very big example of entrepreneurs are, we can say they are Google employees, where they have this innovation room where the employees are supported or motivated to pursue entrepreneurship. There are this conservative category of entrepreneurship where people pursue family business and come up with new entrepreneurial ideas. Then we have women entrepreneurs, where the entrepreneurs are women, and we will say that they are women entrepreneurs if we'll say that entrepreneur is owned and controlled by women if they have a minimum financial interest of 51% of the capital, and they give at least 51% of the employment generated is generated in the enterprise to women. That means the employment in that enterprise is held by almost 51% of the women. So that much for now, and we'll be talking more about the subject in subsequent lectures for PMA. Thank you so much.